Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thought what I'd try and do for you is cover sort of three particular aspects of local government procurement. Some of the things that have been successful in the last couple of years, where the government, the coalition government, wants us to go, and finally some speculation of where I think procurement and local government will go in the next couple of years. I'll say a bit about my own county council. Apart from doing this for the government, I do have a proper job. I'm the chief executive of a large county council. If I put that in context, I spend about £2 billion a year. We have a pension fund of about £4 billion. We have twice the floor area of Marks and Spencer's in the United Kingdom open for business every day, and we have about 300,000 people in those buildings every day. Before my council can do any business every day, it costs us about £150 million to open our door before we teach a child, care for an elderly person, or give you a service. And that was one of the reasons why I got interested in procurement and efficiency. How did I actually make my own council, which was a big council, get more efficient? Obviously, we've now got a perfect burning platform. If you're in local government, reliably informed that next Monday your chief executive will get a letter, your leader will get a letter saying how much money you'll have less in the next 2 years. The other thing that happened in the third bullet point there, we've been talking to government about assets, and John McCready in particular, about what we might do with the assets that we have in the public sector. I'll say a bit about that. Again, if I give you an indication, perhaps something of a Cinderella, those assets have a relatively conservative value today of about £350 billion. About £250 billion of that is in local government. And it's probably fair to say there's been very few or serious looks at those assets and what they could be used and how they could be used more efficiently. The reason the assets are so critical to us, because I think some years ago the private sector worked out more effectively that asset reduction programs were in effect major change programs about their IT, their business processes and the way they transacted business. And I think that's a trend you'll see now in local government. And the last bullet point there is just to say a bit about the National Productivity Workstream, something that was set up as a response to Eric Pickles, the Secretary of State, about how the sector could do things for itself. That itself is a challenge. How do you get 400 local authorities to do the sensible thing? Some people might argue that's just an impossible challenge, but I didn't say it. We've learned from what we've done there are four things which you should be pretty familiar with. You can't do anything now unless you've got some benefits plan. It's very, very hard to see a way through much of this unless there's sensible collaboration with other councils, amongst councils, and with the supply chain. One of the biggest constraints we found is capacity. Do we have? In my time in local government, we've got a head of everything. In my council, we've got a head of every professional service you could think of. The one thing I don't have is a head of commercial acumen. But I've got a head of everything else. And that question of leadership, through this journey that now faces central and local government for whatever reason, it will require very, very significant leadership to find efficiencies rather than cuts. And people like me will come under a great deal of pressure, not just to cut frontline services. We'll have to provide leadership to actually make those services more resilient, but at less cost. We first got into this business by being asked to do something in the southeast, and the southeast of England is a complicated place. There's 74 local authorities, and we managed to get roughly 50 or so working on asset and construction-related activities. And that was the largest single arrangement that had ever been made in local government. Interesting to think. It's had about £3 billion of expenditure go through it in the last sort of four years. Something went wrong up in Oxfordshire, I'm not quite sure. The rest of it is the participating authorities. There's no one here from Oxfordshire, have I? Haven't offended anybody from Oxford, no. And what it demonstrated was that there was actually a capacity for collaboration. It was possible to think of how we can actually do that. And a sense that, indeed, the private sector, quite rightly, was, and why wouldn't it, enjoying the commercial fruits of its success because local government was very, very fragmented in the business that it did. When we did the construction work, we realised that we were looking for something like 10% savings year on year. And there was no point of being able to say to local authorities, come along to a party, get involved with this, unless you can actually put that evidence in place. And that was reasonably easy to do, evidence that was benchmarked by other people and found around the country. The first point there we had to try to do in local government is there was no point in just finding a golden nugget that couldn't be scaled up. We had to try to think of ways, could we get it right, or roughly right, and then could we scale it up? So recently, what we've done in the southeast in London, we've actually done in the northeast of England. We sent a team up to the northeast of England. They're pretty cold, I gather, but they have got back. It was quite a long journey, I understand. But that was probably one of the first times local government had actually used its own people and capacity to help another part of the country. Seems quite strange, doesn't it, that we don't actually do that, but that's quite unusual in local government. The second point that came out of the work in the southeast was we needed complementary capacity. Local government sometimes wasn't the greatest client. It sometimes didn't have the commercial acumen. But sometimes the consultant capacity we were being offered was a one-stop shop, a one-size-fits-all. That wasn't going to work for the nature of the things we were doing, some of them quite sophisticated. And it worked best when we actually put people out, you might recognise this, into other organisations. There's no point in giving somebody a tool book out any longer, a toolkit or a report. It doesn't actually have any impact. The way we made the progress was putting people out into other councils, that they could actually do the work for that council. And the third from the bottom there, local governments had a history about price. For about 5 centuries, it's pursued the lowest price. And of course, the lowest price isn't actually the best value answer. The price is actually something that's given to us by the market. What we should be more concerned with is the cost to the supplier of giving us that. Nowadays, we're much more interested in what it costs the supplier to provide us with the service rather than the price that they give it to us. And I think that's been a fundamental change and will change. So more and more people are getting interested in the supply chain side of the business. And if you think of what we do, it's not uncommon in local government to commission a 15-year contract, a 20-year contract. I've got a 25-year contract for waste worth £250 million. And the supplier, I'm not interested in the price he charges me every year. I'm interested in the cost that he's going to save me. The largest single cost in Hampshire County Council's savings budget for the last 2 years has been the cost saving passed on to us by Veolia. Most significant, it's taken 1% off the council tax for the last 2 years from the supply side because they cooperated in reducing their cost to us. After the success of this, we were asked by the dead hand of government by John Healey and John Denham, the 2 ministers in the last Labour administration, if we'd tackle this nationally, which we have done, and this work is now being rolled out across the different regions or the different geographies of England and proving reasonably successful. East Midlands, West Midlands, good capacity. The North West is building new capacity. London in the South East now has that sort of capacity. I mention this particular programme because one of the most successful things we did was we had to, or we decided we would try to buy a secondary school. It's probably the most complicated thing local government buys. 500 staff, 1,000 children, £50 million a throw, and it lasts for about 40 years before it's knocked down. The challenge was actually to build 10 of them. And you might say, well, that's relatively easy, Andrew. You just multiply it by 10 and get a discount of 10%. What we actually said, we wanted to build 10 of them in 10 different locations for 10 different councils, for 10 different governing bodies, for 10 different head teachers, but with one programme. And they've all finished on time and on success. And basically, we've got the 10th one for free. Or basically, everybody has got something more because of the way we procured them. And I think it's a shining example of what local government and central government and other public sector organisations can do. You can actually deal with that level of complexity